You've been hiking for hours, you're exhausted, you haven't seen a soul, and you can't remember how long, and you're lost. It's starting to get dark. All you have is your day pack, and it looks like you're going to have to spend the night. What do you do? Today we're going to be talking about when things go wrong, and all of a sudden you need to depend on yourself to get yourself out of the situation that you're in. Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. This is a companion podcast to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. And where Active Travel Adventures tells you the who, what, where, and when of some of the planet's coolest adventure destinations that folks like you and I can do, this show is going to teach you the how. You'll learn great tips and hacks on how to pack, how to train, how to get the best flights, how to choose the right companies, pretty much anything that you need to know how to do in order to maximize your enjoyment of your adventure vacation. Like Ada, this show is going to come out every other Thursday, but it'll be on alternate Thursdays, so now you can add a little bit of adventure to every week. Be sure to subscribe to both. It's free, and you can find them wherever you listen to podcasts. Whether we like it or not, sometimes things go wrong. And some also say that's truly when the adventure begins. Things can go wrong for several different reasons. The weather can turn on you. You could injure yourself. You could get lost. Maybe you misjudged your endurance for the day, for whatever the activity is, or you misjudged how long it was going to take you to do. Anyhow, when things go wrong, you need to depend on what's in your pack and your wits in order to get yourself out of the mess that you found yourself in. So I'm going to break down things that you should be putting in your day pack. They should always be in your backpack for sure, but in your day pack, because even on the most innocent of hikes or bikes or whatever activity that you're doing, if you're in the wild, sometimes things can go wrong and you may find yourself spending the night there, self-rescuing if you hurt yourself, or protecting yourself from inclement weather. So let's get started. The first things you need to do is kind of assess the situation and your risk factors for whatever the activity you're doing. So look first, are you doing this solo? Solo, you're going to need to be better prepared because you don't have others with you that can help rescue you from whatever your situation is. Is where you're going crowded? You may have the benefit of strangers helping you, but if you're going into a remote area that you may not see somebody for hours and sometimes days, again, you need to beef up your preparation to make sure that you can self-rescue and to take care of yourself if nobody's around to help you. And it's always a balance between weight and comfort/necessity. I try to go as lightweight as I can, but these items that I'm going to be talking about today are in my pack no matter what. If I make a variation on that, I'll tell you why. It's usually a temperature issue. But for the most part, when I enter the woods now, I am prepared to spend the night, even if I have no intention of doing so. I want to know that it may be makeshift, it may be uncomfortable, it may be ugly, but I can survive the night no matter what the weather brings on. Usually the first thing we worry about is injury. Our first episode of the Adventure Travel Show podcast, we focused on sprained ankles, which is the most common, or probably one of the most common injuries that we have out in the wild. And that's a great episode. If you've not listened to it, you don't think sprained ankles could be interesting? It's a really interesting interview with Dr. Christopher Segler. So what do you pack? Number one, duct tape. Duct tape, as we all know, has a multitude of uses, from doing repairs to your pack. It can help you build things if you have to. You can use it to hold a splint for an injury. There's a myriad of ways. So you always want some duct tape, but you don't want to carry a roll of duct tape. So what I do is I take duct tape and I wrap it around my hiking poles so that I have, and I'm not putting gobs of it, but I probably have a couple feet of duct tape on my poles at any given time. And you do need to refresh that every year because it does get stale if you don't use it. If you don't use hiking poles, then wrap it around a bottle, whether it's a water bottle or something, just to keep it wrapped onto itself so that you can tear it off when you need it. Duct tape is the all-encompassing emergency toolkit. Now let's break them down into different problems. For injury, I don't carry a massive first aid kit. If I do hurt myself, I do try to make shift with things that I've got on hand, but I do always make sure I carry a small tube of antibiotic ointment. I keep a little bit of Compeed. This is a really, really nice bandage that I learned from Simon in the UK, or moleskin. But again, you can also use duct tape if necessary to tape over a blister. I keep a mini pocket knife in case I need to cut a bandage or cut anything. So I take a really nice, small, good quality, tiny mini pocket knife. I keep a small number of Band-Aids, 2, 3, 4 Band-Aids, a couple of individually wrapped alcohol wipes, a bandana. Not only is a bandana good to keep dust out of your nose or to keep your hair in place, you can also use it as a wrap for a bandage to make a splint. You can use it to strain water. So a bandana is right up there with duct tape of things that you really need to have on hand at all times. I carry mine actually by twisting it around twice around my wrist. And by having it so readily accessible on my wrist, it allows me to use it as a sweat rag and a nose wipe. Also, something we learned from Dr. Segler, a compression sock. If you twist your ankle, that compression sock can help you have a strong enough ankle to get back home. So that's basically my, in a nutshell, emergency kit. Some people have a much more elaborate one, but like I said, if I have a severe injury, I'm going to make shift. If I have to tear up my shirt or a bandana or do something, the kinds of activities I do, this is sufficient. The next problem that you can find yourself in a pickle with is getting lost. Number one, you cannot count on your phone. A lot of the places that we're going, there is no reception. And speaking of the phone, when you go out into the woods or into the wild, put your phone in airplane mode so you're not using up all your juice as it tries to find a signal. You'll run out of battery in no time. That'll still give you the opportunity to take pictures and all that. You won't burn up your battery so quickly. Even if you have all the maps and the directions and everything on your phone, you can lose the juice. So you want to make sure you have a map and get a good map. What I do too is if I'm in a place that's well marked, I'll use whatever map's there. But if I'm going someplace that I need really detailed things, I make sure I have a waterproof map that you can usually buy if you're in a Forest Service or something like that. But if they don't have that and I have to make my own, I'll make a copy of whatever it is. And then I water down some Elmer's glue and make a really thin glue. And I'll paint over it, let it dry really good, turn it over, do the same thing. So I'm painting it with this glue mix. Let it dry really well, and then you can take like a little baby powder or something like that so it doesn't stick all over the place. And now you've waterproofed your map. That comes in real handy. So you need to have a map, and with the map, you also should have a compass and know how to use it. I'll put a link on the downloadable PDF that I'll have for today's episode of how to use a compass, how to triangulate, and you should have at least a base knowledge of how to use a compass. Another thing I like to do, just in case I get lost to make it easier for me to be found, and so that if I'm in an area where there's hunters, is I take a little strip of neon fabric and I tie that to the back of my backpack so I'm more readily seen. Another neon thing that I keep is, the surveyor's tape that you see when they're staking out new lots and all that, where the lot lines are? It's really inexpensive. Go to any hardware store should have some. Buy a neon color, and again, wrap it around your poles or wrap it around something in your pack, or just take a little handful of it, and you can use that in the event that you get lost. You don't want to get further lost. So you can take little pieces of it and tie it around a tree so you can mark your path, and let's say you have where you decide you're lost, but you got to figure out which way to go. You can use the surveyor's tape by tying little pieces of it to the twig so you can find your way back to your new base camp or wherever it is that you realize that you were lost. This way you can kind of fan out, and you can, by process of elimination, try to find your way back to the trail. And use the tape in order to identify things, because it's really easy to get confused and go in circles in the woods, particularly if you're a little bit panicky when you're lost. In addition to being lost, sometimes being lost or misjudging of the time, you may find you have to spend the night and you weren't really planning on it. So what do you do then? It usually gets colder at night. So no matter what, even in the heat of summer, I always keep a space blanket with me. This is barely the size of a deck of cards if you cut it in half. It doesn't weigh anything, but these foil blankets will help the body retain its body heat. And this could be important, even if it's not cold. If somebody's injured, you can use that to help with shock and all that kind of thing. So it's a very lightweight emergency item that every pack I have, it's already in there. So I've never had to use it outside of the first time when I was introduced to them by my friend Jerry, who saved my butt when the weather turned dramatically when I was in the mountains. I'm in shorts. I don't have anything. I don't know what I'm doing. This is back in the early days. And I would have frozen if it weren't for that space blanket. So since that day forward, I go nowhere without that. You also need to be able to make a fire. Again, even in the summer, when you get wet, you can still get cold. And what do? It's really hard to start a fire when things are wet. So I always keep a little sandwich baggie that I've got some dryer lint and Vaseline. It makes a great fire starter that's almost foolproof. but you want to be able to light it too. So for that, I use one of those little mini butane cigarette lighters. Works great, weighs hardly anything. You also want to make sure you have a whistle. If you get lost and you know people are looking for you after a certain period of time, you can periodically toot your whistle to help them find you. Speaking of that, somebody should always know where you're planning on going and at what time they should be sounding the alarm. My packs always have, I use a compactor bag, but I line the interior of all my packs with the heavy-duty compactor bag, but a regular garbage bag, a good quality one, would work as well. Not only does it keep the stuff in your pack dry, but then in case of an emergency, you can use that as a poncho. Cut a little hole with your knife or pull it open, stick your head over there. That will help retain your body heat. That, in addition to your heat blanket, your space blanket, you're going to be in pretty good shape. If you're backpacking or going extensively where you can't carry all the water, you're probably already carrying some kind of a water filtration system. And I'll cover water filtration in a separate episode. But if you're not sure and just for a couple of ounces, bring a life straw. These are remarkable straws that you can literally drink out of anywhere and it cleans it up for you. And worth its weight in gold. If you find yourself stranded or without potable water, this can help save the day for you. No matter what the weather, I always bring a rain jacket. If you get a good quality, lightweight one, they'll breathe and it'll give you just a little extra protection. If there's any chance of the temperature getting where it's cold, that if I get really wet, I'll be cold, I will also bring rain pants, which have been a lifesaver countless times. And if there's a chance that it's going to be anywhere lower than 50, no matter what, I'll also bring the waterproof gloves. When you get wet, you get really cold, almost no matter what the temperature. So again, if I'm in the tropics, the rain jacket would be fine. But if I'm anywhere other than the tropics, if I'm in the mountains, the rain pants and the waterproof gloves are a must. Same thing with the thermal jacket. Again, in the tropics, I may not be worried about that so much, but if I'm not in the tropics, that thermal jacket, I get a good quality down jacket, worth its weight in gold, and they don't weigh that much. And they can scrunch them up in a little dry sack, and you'll be fine. Any chance of cold, I bring an extra pair of dry socks. Again, if I have to spend the night, and let's say I'm wet and it's cold, that pair of dry socks will be worth that weight for me. If there's any chance that the temperature is going to be below 50 degrees, bring a balaclava. This is this really interesting head wrappy thing that you can wear in like 20 different ways that can keep your ears warm, your head warm, your neck warm, all sorts of different ways that you can wear it. Or if you don't want to do that, get a wool hat. Like I said, trying to avoid the cold, any chance of being below 50 degrees, it's a good idea to have some kind of a head cover. Also, if you're going to be anywhere in the lower elevations, you want to bring a tiny tube of the insect spray. These are slightly larger than a ballpoint pen, and it can be just what you need to get you through the night so the mosquitoes don't eat you alive. I always like to bring some parachute cord too. This lightweight but strong cord can be used to hang your food if you're in a bear country, to string out clothes, to dry things out if need be, and a multitude of different ways. So at least 20 feet, and if I'm backpacking, I'll bring 50 feet of parachute cord. You may have a flashlight app on your phone. I do. If I'm going into the mountains or someplace where it would be difficult if I had to spend the night, then I will also pack a headlamp. These are great when you're backpacking anyway, but even as a day pack item, if there's a chance, if you're going very remote, it's not a bad idea. This could be helpful if you just need that little extra to make it back after sundown, or if you end up spending the night, it's comforting to have a light. Another lightweight item that's handy to have around in case you get lost is a really small mirror. Just go to the dollar store and buy the cheapest, smallest mirror that you can find. In the event that you are lost for several days and they're out in planes trying to find you, you can actually signal a plane, just like you saw in the cartoons when you were a kid. No matter what the weather, you don't think you're going to need it, you're in the woods, I still would bring some sunscreen just in case. Doesn't have to be a big tube, but just a little bit because you don't know how long you might end up being outside. And lastly, you want a wide brim hat for the same reason. The elements can be the enemy. As much as we enjoy being outdoors, that's where you can find your most aggravation and your most discomfort, is from the heat, the cold, the wind, the rain, the potential snow, sleet, or hail. If you find yourself unexpectedly spending the night in the woods, injured, lost, these 28 items could be the very things that make for a great story later after the event or disaster. In case you're driving or running or unable to make notes yourself, I put together a PDF listing of all the items that we talked about today. You'll get that automatically if you get the monthly newsletter from me, or if you go to activetraveladventures.com/emergency, you'll be able to get it from there as well. To become a subscriber, just visit activetraveladventures.com/newsletter, or just go to the website and click on the newsletter link, or you can always email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com, and I'll put you on the list. In a future episode, I'll outline some of the ways that you can make yourself more comfortable if you find yourself spending the night unexpectedly in the wild, how to build a temporary shelter, how to make a fire when it's wet, and things like that. I hope you found today's episode helpful. If I've forgotten one of your favorite emergency items, pop me a note and let me know. My email is kit@activetraveladventures.com, and if I'm allowed to read your questions or your comments online, be sure to make note of that in your email. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Adventure Travel Show podcast. Until then, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!